right, we're back. Creative Club Podcast. So we're talking about how to sell the world, not the offer. And this popped back into my mind from a book that I just read, which is called Explore Create. And Explore Create's by a guy named Richard Garriott. Richard Garriott was a game designer, one of the pioneers in online gaming, which is a very fascinating space to me. I was never a gamer, never really did that stuff, but from the outside, very interesting because of the amount of world building, the parallels with fantasy, and a lot of that stuff that relays into small business today. So anyway, I'm reading this book, and this guy Garriott is very interesting. So he, on one side, was leading this huge shift. Like he made millions, probably hundreds of millions through the gaming space. On the other side, he was an adventurer. And so that's why the book's called Explore Create. It's basically a documentation of his life, of how he built businesses, but then also how he, went on these insane adventures, went up into outer space, went deep into the ocean underneath the Titanic, and then how the two related. So for him, he needed to go on these adventures to spark creativity. Then he would deploy those ideas into business, and they sort of work back and forth. So anyway, in the book, at one point, this guy had made millions, right? This was before the 2008 stock market crash. And he had a bunch of shares in something called EA Games back then, worth millions. And in the years leading up to this, he had finally, alongside three other guys, figured out how to build a private company to get themselves into outer space. This was his lifelong dream because his dad was an astronaut growing up. But they had told Richard when he was 13 that because of his eyesight, he'd never go into space. So the whole time he was like, okay, I want to get there. I'm going to have to do it myself. So they built this private company leading up to 2008. Suddenly, all of Richard Garriott's cash, which was tied up in shares, collapsed because the stock market crashed. And he needed that cash in order to get to space. So the way it worked was they had built this private company called Space Adventures. They had linked up with the Russians. So Richard Garriott was going to fly into space on a Russian spaceship, I guess. And the seat for the flight was $20 million. He had this cash tied up in his shares, but it went to zero. So he was peaking, right? Because he was all ready to go. All of a sudden, instead of having, 20, 40, $50 million, he had like $1 million or something. So he was fine, but he couldn't get into space, and he had already booked this ticket. And they didn't want the company that they had built, Space Adventures, to not be able to move forward with this flight. They wanted to make the news. They wanted to be the first private company to do this. So anyway, he had lost it all, and he had no choice except for to try and find a buyer who would go into space, who would take this ticket. What he did is he found a guy who used to be a scientist. His name was Dennis Tito, and this guy had moved away from creating this company called Rocket Propulsion's Laboratory or something into starting a very successful and very big hedge fund. So they knew this guy was cashed up. They knew he was a scientist. They knew he was interested in space. They knew he was interested in travel, all of these things. So he was ticking all the boxes. They went to this guy directly, and they pitched the idea of him going into space. Basically what he did to make the sale, it was a $20 million sale if you think about it, was he pitched the whole world, right? So he knew that the guy, the scientist, was in his life playing this game of the mad scientist / entrepreneur, and that he wanted to, be involved in space, and that was his sort of game. And so what Richard Garriott does, he came to him, he said, look, we've got this seat on the spaceship, and showed him how this offer, basically the thing you could sell, would help this guy move forward in the world of exploration and space travel, and that he would be the first private, I think it was the first or second private citizen to do this trip. So he wasn't selling him his flight in particular. He wasn't selling him, the flight from Space Adventures. He was selling him a stepping stone or a piece of magic in this world of going into space, of being an adventurer. And so the guy bought it, and the flight went ahead. He was successful, and he came back, and he broke the news and all the rest of it. So this is the concept of selling the world, not the offer, or becoming an evangelist of the world, everything that you're about in your business, everything that you're doing, the world that you're creating. And then your offer becomes the obvious choice for people who want to play that game or want to step into your world. So most businesses do the opposite. They have a service and they want to sell it to people, and they do what's called comparative superiority. Our service is better for XYZ reasons. Sometimes they say this explicitly, like, hey, our price is here, they're up here, or we have more access to this, or you can get these extra benefits with us. Sometimes it's just subconscious, so locked in the mind of the business owner. And they're looking at what they're doing, and they're kind of looking out at the competition, and then they're trying to one-up people, right? It's sort of a relative positioning thing that kind of goes on. And there's a big focus on features, there's a big focus on benefits. In the coaching space, just because that's what we do in business coaching, it would be like, I'm a coach, I help people with this problem, and this is, this is the price, this is the value. But the issue with that sort of positioning or that sort of mindset is that there's no really strong story. There's no world, no underlying reason from the perspective of the customer to stay in it for a long period of time. So you end up with this kind of superiority thing going on. You see a lot of frustration with other businesses pop up, and they get kind of comparison. And there starts to be competition on price. Sometimes it's overtly, sometimes it's subconsciously. So you talk to a business owner, it's like, we're going to do it at this price because it's cheaper, or this price because it's in the middle. And this is kind of my view on why I think that there's a lot of contempt in the online business space. It's because what you see for a lot of businesses, especially on social media, is trying to position relatively versus creating a new world and selling this new world that they're all about with a different narrative and a different story. And so you sort of see this friction that exists. People kind of shut down other businesses, or it's this sort of division that's there that doesn't really need to be there. When you think about that from the customer's point of view, it ain't that attractive, because basically what they see is, a business saying, this is why we're great, versus, hey, check out this amazing world, that this is what's happening and you can be a part of this, and this is who you can become. So it's quite a different framing, and that's what we'll go through a couple of examples today. When you sell the world that you're creating, you're starting to look at what things look like from the customer's perspective. So the question really is, what is the world that you're creating? Why does it exist? Why is now important for that world to exist, and your business is part of that world? Who does the customer become as they move forward in your world or in the game that you're creating? And what is possible for them in the new world? Like, what does life look like for them as they advance in the game that you're building or the world that you're creating in your business? And how does status work in this world? So can you show your customer how their status can go up in this culture that you're creating by advancing in whatever it is that you do? So let's look at a couple of examples to break this down. So let's say you got a yoga studio, and there's a lot of different yoga studios. A lot of them are pretty similar, which, when you come to think about it, it's why it's so easy to differentiate, to create a unique character. There's a guy on social media that Ruby was showing me. His name's Yogi Brian, and he does all of these super different videos. He's very real. He wears this wide brim hat, purple hat a lot of the time. He swears like a sailor. He's always swearing. He has tats on his face. His whole world is built around yoga and meditation, but this concept of relatability is like threaded through it. And he's blown up, and because he's doing things differently relative to everyone else in the yoga and meditation space. It's very relatable. As the late Jim Camp, who we talk about a lot, would say, he's very un-okay, right? So he shows his flaws a lot, which means that when we watch him, we feel super relaxed, right? Because we can relate to this guy. He doesn't sort of act high and mighty or enlightened, but paradoxically, he probably is fairly enlightened. He's fairly switched on, and very, very engaging, right? So anyway, there's a bunch of yoga studios in the town that we live, and from what I understand, they kind of jostle for position a little bit. One of them that I'm aware of is building a world in the way that we're talking about here. Now, the others might be too. I don't actually know. I haven't looked into them. I might not be aware of it, but one of them is, and that world is based on connection and bringing people together. Okay, so that's kind of the overarching narrative. The narrative is, look, since 2020, people are really isolated, and the way that we're dealing with this is we're getting distracted, whatever. We actually have created a new world over here. It's based around yoga. What it is a place to come in, do your yoga, meet really cool people, show up exactly as you are and not be judged for that. Do your yoga, connect with people, make friends. Then we've also got these retreats and other things that you can do. So that's their world. It's unique. It's unlike any other studio. How do they do that? Actually, well, they have these retreats where people come together. They do staff days. They bring the staff together, and they make a point of being very welcoming in the studio, where you can come in. There's no phones or videos or photos inside the studio. It's very welcoming. You can sort of wear whatever you want. It's super relatable, like they're very friendly. This is different from a lot of other yoga studios, a little bit more, rigid, a little bit more uptight, or have a certain image that they're kind of holding. Anyway, it's kind of like the guy that we spoke about on Instagram, that one of the owners or both the owners of the studio are very relatable and people get along with them. And they also show what's going on in their lives a little bit more, which helps with that same connection piece. So they've got this different game, this different world that they're selling, right? And then the membership is how you buy into it, right? Like that's how you get started in it. So the game or the world is like, hey, over there, you can go and do yoga classes, no problem. But we can see that the culture's changed and more people are isolated now. And the way we typically deal with that is we tune out. So we built this other new world, which is all around connection and coming together. They're evangelists, for this concept of connection. Yoga is a part of that. People can join that world through the yoga membership. So the change in the culture that we see for them, it was, the culture getting more isolated after 2020 can often lead to why your world exists, right? We'll go into that more in another episode. Let's look at another example. I talk about music a fair bit, and not because it's like directly service business, but it's very applicable. The world building side, I think, is very applicable anyway. So if you ever listen to any hip hop, you'll know 50 Cent. If you haven't, you probably still know 50 Cent. And a lot of people won't like 50 Cent. That's totally fine. You still can learn a lot from this example, which is why I bring it up. What happened was they went after him, right? Another gang went after 50 Cent for whatever reason. And basically, shot him, tried to kill him. They got him, but he survived. And what he did is he went to his grandmother's house, and he was basically laying in bed recovering for months. When he was in recovery, he was listening to the hip hop, and it's like, this isn't real. This isn't what the sounds that are coming out. I can do better than this. They're not telling the story of what it's really like. It's sort of staged. It's kind of poppy, and he got frustrated. So what he did is when he got out of recovery, he went to work, he created a track, and he was still sort of in hiding because he knew that these people were still after him. He released this one track, and it was really heavy. It was very raw, it was very real. He had this lisp because where one of the bullets had gone through his jaw, it kind of like changed how he spoke. And he had this totally new sound. And what he was doing was tying together the whole world of the streets where he lived, the music, the rap industry, the whole entire thing, what was really going on. He built that world through the music. So because it was so real and because he was telling the story so clearly, people couldn't get enough of this music. They could listen to the track, keep up to speed with what was going on culturally, advance in the world by being more familiar in the track, get status by being more familiar with the track, more familiar with what was going on. And very quickly, what 50 Cent was doing was he was selling the world of real hip hop, real rap music, and what was really going on in the streets, rather than this sort of staged thing that was existing beforehand, which was much lighter, a lot more surface level. So people, were buying his tracks because it was exciting. They were the tracks were like the magic that kept them up to speed with that whole world. And he went viral. And so basically he started to release his tracks. People, would release diss tracks back at him. He would counter back. And he just went from strength to strength and got more and more popular. That's a really good representation, because if you look at it, he is an evangelist for his world. He was like, I'm going to be the spokesperson for the true culture. And so that was the basis for his tracks. And this is exactly what you do in your business when you're an evangelist for your world. You're not saying, hey, buy my offer, buy my offer, buy my offer. You're saying, hey, I believe in the world of connection, or I'm an evangelist for the world of strength, or the world of like small business, whatever it is that you do. And your content becomes all around that. So people gravitate towards that world, and then your offers exist inside of that world. So you're advocating for your world, not just for your service. So like in Creator Club, it's basically the same thing, right? We're selling the world of being a creator. We're marketing the world of being a creator, of building your unique business, of not playing the same game as everybody else and having to do the same tactics on social media. You don't have to play the game just like everyone else is playing it. You get to build your own unique world around your business and kind of create your own tactics and go your own path. And you don't need to do the professional photos if you don't want. You don't need to do the hashtags. You don't need to do the videos the same as everybody else. You can do things your way and speak to your people and make a lot of money doing that, be very successful doing that. So that's how our thing, which is like this world of being the creator, which is more imaginative, more artistic, more independent, not tethered to sort of what everyone in your industry is doing. And the fact that these are the kinds of small businesses that really bring the culture back together and, create a better culture. That's the world of the creator, right? So it's a very imaginative way of being, and it's a very specific world. You can advance in the world through, creating new things, creating new offers, growing your business, and making more money. So we're advocates of that whole process, which is why you see, different people on the podcast, or I'll, on my social media, for example, there's a lot of I'll just talk about businesses that are doing great work in the culture, because we're evangelists for that world. And then the offers that we have are tools to help you become a better creator, to become more successful in your business, and to see your business in that way, to see your business much more creatively or independently, or rather than basically creating a business like everyone else. So if we do a workshop, or we have a membership, or we have, the Creator Club, you can join the business coaching membership. We teach, how to write an offer framework, or how to do a sales page, or how to do email marketing. Those things are not offers that just stand alone. Those are specific pieces of magic to move forward as a creator. So you become more skilled, you up level as a creator in that world. You get to think of your business that way as well, which makes it lots easier to create a lot of content, to be prolific, because you're an advocate for the whole world, right? So final example we'll look at is a gym, only because they're doing really well right now. I just got a message from them last week, and their revenues, going up. It went up by like 30% in 1 month on month recurring. So I won't go into details. I won't give the name because I don't know if they want it to be shared, but basically the gym is in Melbourne, which was locked down for like a couple of years. They were getting slammed. And when they came in, they talked about their business, and we opened up the website, had this really professional video of what the gym looked like. And it was like, wow, that's beautiful, and the coaches were experts, but there was really no underlying story. So what would happen is people would join the gym, they'd have these classes, then they would leave, and it was a sort of transient vibe. It wasn't really that different to any other gym. And so what we did is we got really clear on what the world that they're building wants to look like, what they're really about, what that world was. And basically it was a blend of two things: expert level coaching delivered in a fun way. So basically, if you think about it, the gym's in the middle of the city. It's for corporates, right? Most of the time, who work there or who live nearby the CBD. So corporates who value mastery, who value expertise, who value good coaching. Both of the coaches are level 3 CrossFit, which is quite rare to have in the same building on the floor at the same time. But they're for people who also like to have fun, like to go out on the weekends. Maybe they get dressed up, they go to parties. So what these guys did is they doubled down on both of those. So now you go to the website. There's a big photo there, it's filled with people like having fun, high-fiving, but then the background, there's people training, very colorful, bright. Then they'll do events, which are like really on the fun side. And so they're blending this deep expertise, but delivered in a fun way. And so that's their world. And what they do is they create little tokens that they give to people who advance in their world by doing certain tasks. They create events, and their timeline is very much positioned around this unique world that they're building. So what happens is people join that world for the CrossFit or for the training, but they build relationships with this whole game and they stay there. From the business perspective, the lifetime value goes up, people hang around for longer, and they're enjoying that process. They refer people more easily, and then therefore revenue goes up. What they're doing is selling the world of longevity, of expert guidance and coaching delivered in a fun way. And they do a lot of social media, a lot of content, podcasts where they're talking about these things, creating value, sharing this world. And then, okay, if you want to jump into that, if you want that guidance, you can sign up here as a member for the gym, right? But it's less of an emphasis on here's why you should join our program, and more of an emphasis on the world. People are immersing in that world for a longer period of time. Then when they come in, the sale is lots easier because they want to advance, they want to jump in. Of course, at the end, you've got an offer framework, you're sharing your offer, and there's the transaction side, but the general story, the general marketing, the general thing that you're talking about with this approach is becoming an advocate for your world, what it's all about in the culture. Then that really powers up your content. You can do tons more, much more prolific, much easier. The offer then sits behind that. A lot of people are selling an offer, but the overall vision that they have on what it means for the customer ain't that clear. So what it does is it comes across as a self-serving process. Buy my offer to solve this problem, and then that's it. And that can work, but it's also a transactional position, right? Like it's like one in, one out. And that isn't necessarily world building, okay? So then what happens is people can leave. But if you clarify the overall world that you're building first, right? That's the first step. The overall game that you're inviting people to play. Why that world exists, why it exists today. Then you present that to people. This is what we stand for. This is where we're going. This is why it's important now. And then you become evangelists for that world. And you're looking for PR opportunities. You're doing podcasts, whatever it is. People can see what the value of that world. They can buy into it. They go, yeah, I get that. And that's where I want to be. That's who I want to be with. That's how I want to advance. This is going to give you tons of content because you can write articles, you can talk about it, you can share it. But B, it allows you to sell from a place of deep belief because you're selling from your vision of the why, right? Why your world exists. You're selling from the excitement of your world. You're selling from, you think that world's really cool. You're not selling from, hey, I need 3 clients to buy my offer, right? So it's a very different energy on the sale. It's a very different energy when you share the offer. You're selling because you're excited about it. You believe in it, not because you need a few more clients or you need a few more members in your gym or whatever it is. Sell the world all the time. And then when you go to share your offer, it will be the obvious choice for people who want to buy into your world and what you're about. All right. We went a little over time. That's enough for today. We'll see you on the next episode.